So yeah, thanks for inviting me in Daisuke. I'm very honored to be able to share with you guys right now and soon in October. And hopefully you'll be able to join us. I am Rocío Tejada, as Daisuke shared. I am a director and artist here in Puerto Rico. I have a project nonprofit, which is called Verde Aguacate Foundation. And part of our work is creating network between cultures and to link Caribbean history and also to provide artists and workshops to rural communities here in Puerto Rico. So that's kind of part of the work we do. But today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the Caribbean, and hopefully, we'll learn something. And if you have any questions, just let me know or write them down. And maybe by the end, we could answer those questions. So this presentation is called A Link to the Caribbean because I would like for you to get to know a little bit about what's been happening in the Caribbean this time. And okay, so today we're gonna be reflecting on a lot of subjects regarding contemporary Caribbean. I'm gonna explain to you a little bit about the political development in the Caribbean and economical development, just so you know a little bit of how this kind of shapes a little bit what how we are formed, and how migration also set a standard and created a multicultural culture within the Caribbean indigenous establishment. So let's talk about that. So part of what are we gonna be talking today is the project of Woven Islands, which is practically an exploring heritage and how contemporary artists and also activists are appropriating of what it means to be Caribbean right now, and how to engage in all the changes that currently condition how we stay in our communities, and how is that slowly changing because of climate change and also because of political involvement. So the Caribbean is in the south and kind of in the middle part of America. As you can see here, everything that is part of, touches the Caribbean Sea is considered the Caribbean. So there's a lot of islands that have different development because within the political and colonization of the areas, different countries were divided, and this created kind of like a separation and alienation of the geography. So even though you see right now that they are very close to each other, we are actually struggling to know what's happening in other parts of the Caribbean currently. So from liberation to bomba, Caribbean heritage has long summoned authenticity of its people and paving way for unity. And this is something that we are going to be able to see within the art and cultural development of the Caribbean. I'm going to talk today specifically of Puerto Rico, but also I want to recognize other parts of the Caribbean that develop independence and fought for creating an identity for ourselves. So part of what I want to share today is that even though the Caribbean has been part of political process that were dehumanizing for us as a community, and for African slave trade that happened in Atlantic slave trade. We want to honor the memory of the communities, and you know, the culture that begins with the creation of collective life. And that is something that we have been fighting for ourselves. So for an example,
let me translate a little bit.
Okay.
さっきも僕も話したけど、カリブ海っていうのはいろんな言語の国にこう分かれてて、それぞれ島だからね、すごい近くに、お互い近くに、位置しているんだけれど、お互いのことをあまり知らないという問題がある。そのつながりというか交流っていうのを築いていけていないところがあるということを話したんだよね。で、もともとはその地域にはタイノ is the name of the people who used to live there, right? タイノ。
Yeah, the indigenous natives, yeah.
先住民のタイノって言われる、部族の人たちが、他の部族もあったけれど、たくさん住んでいて、その人たちが、ある意味すごく大量に死んで、大量に虐殺されて、でそこのところに後の人たちが入ってきて、それぞれの植民地を作ってしまったんだよね。でそういう歴史、それからそこから今度は独立を果たしていく戦いがあって、そういう歴史があり、そして現代っていうものがあると。そのことをお互いのことをなかなか知らない中で、でもカリブ海っていうアイデンティティを作っていかなきゃいけないっていう気持ちで活動しているんですと。自分はプエルトリコからだけどカリブ海の人間として今日の話をしたいと思います。Yes? Yeah.
Okay. Keep going. Okay, great. So basic information of the Caribbean is that there are 43 countries that form part of the Caribbean, and there are only 13 islands in the Caribbean that are independent currently. So that means that there's a lot of influence of the French and the English and Spanish within the islands. But right now, the most influential are United States, France, and Netherlands, who have still colonies in the Caribbean. And some of them that achieve independence still have a political and governance influence within the island. So it kind of makes a question of if these spaces are really completely independent, and how does detaching by a process of democracy, we're gonna question like how is this being achieved and is it being achieved? So in the Caribbean currently there's 11 languages that are spoken and they're regional. There's a lot of migration within the islands, and there's a lot of people from the Caribbean who have moved to other countries and being part of the community of diaspora, and this has been essential for the continuity of our cultural heritage. So yeah, I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah, let me explain.
Okay.
Yeah. So カリブ海には43の、国っていう言い方をしたけど、その国があって、だけどそのうちの独立している国は13、13だけが独立を果たしていますと。で、言語で言うと11の言語が話されていて、一番影響力が大きいのはやっぱアメリカだから、英語がすごく影響力があるって言えると思います。でもフランスもすごく影響力があるし、オランダも影響力がある。それでそれらの国はこの地域にいまだにその植民地というかね、自分たちのテリトリーを維持しているという中で、それで今度そこに住んでいる人たちは非常に他の地域に移住している人が多くって、その行った先のコミュニティとの交流っていうのもあり、とってもそういうなんていうか複雑な行き来のある多様性の中で存在しているのがカリブ海地域です。Yes, please.
Okay. So to talk a little bit about the political process of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico right now is a colony of the United States, even though it is presented as a territory. It's actually a colony. They invaded Puerto Rico in the 1898. So this created a political at that moment, a year before, Puerto Rico had achieved independence from the Spain. So this means that this transition created a new precedence of violence and threat to Puerto Rican identity at the moment. So in 1989, when United States established themselves here, they created a process of assimilation where they would try to make Puerto Ricans speak English, and also they were illegalizing having an identity by ourselves. So what I'm gonna talk about here, we're gonna like be coming in different timelines, but I'm gonna try to explain to you guys how that goes. So I'm gonna talk about the Institute of Culture, Puerto Rican Culture. It was established in 1955 by Ricardo Alegría, and they created a program to educate communities from rural areas, because at the moment we didn't have like a strong establishment of education in the island. So this was an effort to include people from rural areas that maybe did not have the knowledge to read or to write, and it was a form to educate them in what was happening at the moment. So this part in particular, the Diveco, it was that program, but the Institute of Culture created a space where Puerto Rican culture can be presented and also preserved. So a lot of the indigenous spaces and artifacts that were being found in Puerto Rico, this program created the possibility to be able to preserve them and present them to the community. So this is very important, because when United States came to Puerto Rico, it was very evident that they created a mindset where they would say that Taino were extinct. You know, that's something that was part of our education, where people would see like our connection to the indigenous people of Puerto Rico as something that is like far away. But in reality, in the 1920s and 1930s, you would see still Taino people that would look like Tainos, and still in our DNA, there's still Taino heritage within us. I don't know if you want to explain that before I keep going, or
Let me explain here.
yeah.
まあ、とにかくね、複雑な歴史があって、もともとだからスペインの、植民地だったんだよね。それが、一回はそこから独立したんだけど、その後アメリカに、再吸収されるということが起きて、で、ちょっとハワイに似てるんだよ、そういうところはね。でもハワイは州になったのに、ここは州になってないんだよ。今でもなんていうの、植民地扱いになっているんですよ。そんな中で、アメリカの政府の態度っていうのは、そこのプエルトリコの人たちが、まあ、それこそ昔の沖縄みたいに、プエルトリコのアイデンティティを持つことを禁止したりもして、アメリカ人化しようという政策を取ったりもしたことがあるわけね。だけど本当はそこの人たちはタイーノっていう、先住民の文化があり、言語がありっていう人たちで、見た目も、まあ、言ってみればだからアジア人にちょっと似てるようなアメリカインディアンにも似てるようなそういうような人たちが、まあ、いて、その人たちとスペインからたくさん入ってきた人たちのミックスと、それからそこにすごいたくさんの黒人というかアフリカ人が奴隷として連れてこられたから、そういう人たちがいて、そういうミックスの中でいろんな文化がこう複雑に存在する地域なんですよ。それを1955年にこのリカルド・アレグリアっていう人がプエルトリコ文化研究所っていうのを作ったことがすごく重要で、それが今にもこうずっと続く流れの中で、 その文化を維持しようという運動の中で重要な役割を果たしてきていて、今は政府の中にそういうコミュニティエデュケーションディビジョンというのがあって、コミュニティ教育をしてますと。で、そのコミュニティ教育のそのセクションがやってることはすごく意味があって、すごく芸術活動、例えばスクリーンプリンティングってわかる？こうなんかね、ポスターだとか T シャツだとかをこう印刷するときに使うような、そういうのをワークショップをやったりとかして、それでそこでその文化運動、民衆の文化運動みたいなのをこう続けて、支援しているから、その力で結構ここに書いてあることに関して言うと、ちょっとよく分からなかったんだけど、ポスターを貼ったりするような形で自分たちの文化アイデンティティなんかを主張するというような、そんなような文化活動があるみたいですね。ちょっと音がね、よくわかんないんだよね。聞きづらくなってて。ね。
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So from this program, one important phenomenon happened is that el cartel, which is poster, which is a culture of poster from screen printing that was emerging from this program, and they were educating at first, but then the artists started to get political and talk about what was happening in Puerto Rico and how we were being threatened to not able to express our identity. So I'm gonna show you some carteles and explain to you a little bit the history behind them. So the one on your left, I think, it says Puerto Rico habla español, which means Puerto Rico speaks Spanish. So this is criticizing that when in the 1950s, when the United States were forcing everyone to speak English. And in our country, we were invaded initially by Spain. So everyone had knowledge on Spanish only. So it's like, it's hard to imagine, but it's like you were speaking, your language, and then someone comes in and makes you speak another language that you know nothing of. So in the schools, they were forcing that everyone had to do military salutes in the morning. They had to present their respects to the American flag. They had to all speak English. And this was something that was implemented, and it was clearly threatening what the Puerto Rican communities were working so hard to maintain within their colonial process before the United States. So here, the next poster talks about El Grito del Are, which is an uprising that happened when the Spanish government was in Puerto Rico. So even though we did not achieve success in that uprising, it was very important for us to be able to express that we wanted our autonomy at the moment, and that created an influence for other generations to keep trying to visualize our identity and our separation from the colonial power at the moment. So something that happened very symbolic and important at that moment is the flag that you're seeing in this poster is the liberation flag of Puerto Rico, and it is very enlazada. Oh, I forgot that word in English. I'm sorry. But it is related to the Cuban flag at the moment. So this poster is gonna relate to this mural that I'm gonna show right now. This mural is made by an all-female collective muralist that is called Moribibi, and they made this at El Grito de Arte, which is a festival that started in Lares where the uprising happened. And it's a way to like keep honoring the intent to visualize ourselves as Caribbean and not dissociate from our geographical identity. And so in this picture, in this mural, you can see that Mariana Bracete, which is what the Puerto Rican poet and activist that designed and drew the Puerto Rican liberation flag.
Let me explain.
Okay.
Let me just. で、だからそういう、ああいうね、芸術を広めるというか、民衆教育のためにやっていたポスター作りのワークショップとかなんだけど、そこから出てくるものはやっぱすごく人々のメッセージみたいなのが強く出て、それは政治性を帯びてくる。それで、例えば、プエルトリコ、アブラ・エスパニョルっていうのは、プエルトリコはスペイン語を喋るんだっていうポスターなんだよね。っていうのは、その時期、アメリカが植民地化して、英語を、今まで英語を誰も喋ってなかった島に英語を喋れる人たちばかりにしようという教育をしたわけだよね。で、アメリカの国旗に向かって毎朝学校でだと思うけれどこう敬礼をしたりとかそんなようなことを要求するようなそんな時代にプエルトリコはスペイン語を喋るんだというポスターが出てきたりするわけですよね。もう一個のポスターの話はちょっとよく聞こえなかった分かんなかったけど多分その独立、スペインの植民地化政策から、独立した戦いの独立戦争みたいなやつの絵だったのかもしれない。で、こっちのその次に出てきたやつは、あれはそのマリアナっていうすごい、僕は知らないけど有名な詩人がいて、その人のことを大きな壁画にしたんだって。どんな壁画かというと、我々はそのカリブ海の人間なんだっていうんで、海の中で自分たちの旗をこうやって縫い上げていくっていうことで自分たちのアイデンティティを作ってるっていうそういう主張をしてるっていうようなそういう大きな壁画を作ったもしてる。ちなみに今度日本に来たらそういう壁画をやりたいって言われてるんだよね。壁画をどこでやるかっていうね。はい。This is beautiful.
Okay.
You want to, when you come to Japan, you want to do a mural too, right?
Yes, I would love to. We'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see if we get to it,
we'll see what we can do. I mean, at least we can paint a big paper and post it somewhere, a large art, something like that, right?
Yes, and maybe some of you guys can join us to create this.
こういう絵を日本に来たら、その巨大な絵を描いて、壁に描きたいね、本当はね。で、それはできるのかって前から聞かれてるんだけど、難しいとは思うんだけど、似たようなことはできるんじゃないかと。皆さんもぜひ一緒にやりましょう。参加してください。Yes, please.
Okay, so these are other carteles, and I'm showing these ones in particular because they're very commemorative of what we've been creating as our Caribbean heritage. And the one on the left, the yellow poster, it talks about La Plena, which is an authentic music genre here in Puerto Rico. And it is music of resistance. This genre in specific is very well known to, it was part of how communities communicated their concerns through, within the musical space, which is something very common for communities that have been struggling and have been enslaved or deprived of their liberation. Music has always been something very important to maintain resistance. So that's why I'm showing this in particular. And the other picture, which says migration, it is something that is very, I think it's very commonly shared within the Caribbean islands specifically. But I know for sure that other countries can go through the same experience. So I'm gonna talk about in particular because in Puerto Rico, there were various times where massive amounts of Puerto Ricans were moved to work in in factories in New York specifically. So a lot of communities, Puerto Rican communities, developed in New York and in Chicago. And also, a lot of Puerto Rican workers were also moved to Hawaii as well. So this is something that we've been experiences as a collective where massive people leave the island. So that really puts the culture and identity vulnerable because communities are being separated, families are being separated. So when that happens, it's very tricky to maintain your resistance in a process like this. So yeah, no sé si quiera explain a little bit before I go to the next one.
まあ、音楽はもちろんそういうね、文化運動にとってとても大切なことだということと、こっちのね、エミグラシオンって書いてあるのは、これはイミグラシオンじゃなくて、エミグラシオンというのは、イミグラシオンというのは入ってくることなんですね。エミグラシオンというのは出てくることなんですね。で、IM と E の違いなんだよね。で、エミグラシオンっていうポスターは、つまりこれニューヨークなんだよ。ニューヨークにものすごくたくさんのプエルトリコ人が移住して働いてるわけ。もう昔からそういうプエルトリカンのコミュニティがニューヨーク、それからシカゴ、それからハワイ。ハワイはあれだよね、ブルーノ・マースもプエルトリカだよね。ハワイのね。で、そういう、ブルーノ・マース is Puerto Rican, right? ブルーノ・マース。
Yes, he's like half Puerto Rican, I think. Yeah.
あの人は半分ハワイで半分プエルトリコの。
He's Hawaiian and Puerto Rican, I think.
そういうふうにハワイとシカゴとニューヨークっていうふうにすごくプエルトリコの人が住んでて、プエルトリコだけじゃなくてカリブ海の人たちはそういうあちこちに移住してるから、今度は移住した先でお互い距離が生まれてしまった中でこういうカリブ海の文化を戦い続けながら守っていくっていうそういう運動を維持していくのはとても大変なんですよって話をしてですね。はい、Yes, please.
Yes. So I want to share as well before, sorry about the noise. Something I want to share as well is that, you know, Puerto Ricans, even though they were like struggling within the Spanish ruling, is, you know, they were not completely like miserable and poor that they would need to like move as masses. But when United States established themselves in the island, they would take anyone who had more than 70 acres and they would just leave them 3 acres and steal the other land and give it to the commercial development of the United States. So people would come here, they would get acres of good land because the soil here is very fertile, and they would like destroy the ecology of our island, and they would create an economy of monocrops and tourism.
それでアメリカはそのプエルトリコを植民地にしたときにそのプエルトリコのそのあちこちの土地をどんどん接収してそれをアメリカから移住してくる人たちにどんどん与えていったわけだよね。でプエルトリコというのはとても土壌が豊かなので農業に適している。でその農業が適している中でその非常に巨大なプランテーション農業を始めてそれでお金を稼ぐ。それからもちろんトゥーリズムっていうことでアメリカからのトゥーリストを呼び寄せるっていうそういうことでアメリカ本土の人たちが移住してきてそこで大変この豊かな生活ができるような仕組みを作っていってしまったっていう歴史があります。Yes.
So this as a natural response of the destruction of the local economic, this would create poverty. So that's why a lot of people felt obligated to migrate at that time. So I want to show here a mural from one of the artists who will be joining us in October, who is Rafael Vega, also known as Rafike. And Rafael is a muralist that is dedicated to showing the Taino heritage of Puerto Rico within his art form. So here we can appreciate a female indigenous Taina holding a Taino vase and having Taino jewelry and resembling that culture that we still have. You know, we have people who know how to do ceramics as the Taino used to do it. We still have that, and we still have a lot of artifacts, heritage, and petroglyphs from Tainos. And you know, I want to take this moment to talk a little bit of what's going on at the moment in the island. So part of the political influence that is happening right now. And as I said, our process of maintaining ourselves in in this island and be able to call ourselves Puerto Rican has been a very rough and violent process. And right now,
じゃだからそういうアメリカ本土から来た人たちが豊かな生活ができるようになるというプロセスは今度はそこに前から住んでた人たちが貧困化していくというプロセスでもあって、そのために海外にどんどんアメリカ本土に移住しなきゃいけないという状況が生まれてきてしまったんですよね。で、それの中で自分たちはなぜプエルトリコに残って自分たちの文化をこうやって守ろうとして頑張っているのかっていうことなんだけれど、例えば今度来るアーティストの一人はラファエルっていう人でこういう絵を描く人なんだね。これ壁画だけど、この壁画はそのタイーノっていう昔から住んでいた部族っていうか先住民の人たちのいろんな、こういう文化を表現した、女性の絵です。で、今どんなことがプエルトリコで起きているかっていう話をお伝えしたいと思います。Yes?
yes. So in our political process, we are a territory, which is another word for colony. But in 2017, we lost autonomy within the government because the United States implemented a fiscal board that would make decisions for the island and pay a debt that's never being fiscalized. So this is destabilizing a lot of areas, especially the educational areas in public education and a lot of other parts like natural resources. So I just want to give this reflection that right now we as Puerto Rican need artists like Rafael because the current governor is threatening to close down the Institute of Culture and put it within the Economical Development Department of Puerto Rico. So this means that all the heritage that we've been preserving to keep our identity is threatened right now. So it's something that I just want you guys to have in mind and just to reflect on that.
政治、だからそのプエルトリコはテリトリーっていう呼ばれ方をして、それはある意味植民地って言葉の別の言い方なんだけれど、領土なんだ。アメリカ領土で州ではないのね。独立してないわけ。州でもない。で、2017年にちょっとよく分からなかったんだけど、何か大きな政治的な決定がなされて、さらにいろんなプエルトリコの人たちが自分たちのことを決めることが難しい状況ができてしまった。で、今のプエルトリコはある時から自分たちの知事っていうのは持ってるんだけど、その今の知事はこの文化ディビジョンってさっき文化教育ディビジョンって言ったやつ、あれを閉鎖して、経済開発デパートメントとかそういうところの中の一部の機関にしてしまおうとしてるっていうことを考えていて、すごく危機的な状況にあって、私さっき見せたようなああいう壁画を描くようなああいうアーティストが一生懸命そのタイーノの時からのその自分たちの伝統的な文化、アイデンティティを守ろうとしてきた活動がとても危険な状況にさらされているんです。
Okay. So now we're going to talk about a bit about music in the Caribbean. I feel like maybe some of you have listened to some of the artists, popular artists that are going on right now. And so I'm gonna share here some of the instruments that were created within the Caribbean and are of Caribbean heritage. And some of the instruments are influenced as well of our African migration heritage and Spanish heritage as well. So this is a list of genres in the Caribbean. Maybe you guys may know some of these genres yourself. There's reggae music that was developed in Jamaica, soca in Trinidad, calypso in Trinidad and Tobago, dancehall in Jamaica, merengue is very popular in Dominican Republic, bachata as well. So if someone is a fan of music here, I would take a picture of this genre and maybe look for some of them later and see if you like any of them. But I would like to share some of them with you. I'm gonna put images of some of the instruments we have here in the island. We have maracas, and which is the one the person is holding. El güiro is the one in the middle, and el cuatro is a guitar especially developed in Puerto Rico, and it has each note that is like refining the sound has 2 chords. So that means that like the 4, it's like the double amount of a normal guitar. And the pandero, which is down, is actually played with the hand, and it's a percussion that is used in La Plena. So we have 2 genres that are African influence, which is La Plena and Bomba. And the difference from one and the other is that Plena, the percussion is played and in the hand, and the bomba is el barril, which is played by another kind of drum. So that's the only difference between one and the other is the percussion.
And you will bring those instruments to Japan when you come?
Yes, I'll see if we can find a barril over there, because barril are huge to travel, but we will definitely we will definitely try our best. So we're gonna take a break from the presentation because I want you to have the experience of some of these sounds. And so we're gonna do a little
レゲエとかね、カリブ海のすごい有名な音楽、いろんな種類があるんだよね。で、そういう楽器もいろんな特殊な楽器がありますよ。
Okay.
で、ちょっと聞いてもらいたい。
Yes. So before we leave to listen to music, I want to talk about 2 musical artists specifically, and they are born in the Caribbean. And one is Bob Marley. I don't know if any of you know of him, but he's a reggae music artist, and he's someone who's politically been involved and is very political in his words as well, and how he has used that to create conscience and to fight for unity within the communities. And I think that's such a strong message that his music's still relevant to this day, Is someone like who has really, his message has traveled so much that when I went to Bangladesh, for example, like the only Caribbean reference that we had was Bob Marley. So that's like super impressive for me personally. And also I admire his music and, and his expression, musical expression and activism.
ジャマイカの人ね。まずカリブ海っていう、世界中の人はボブ・マリーのことしか知らないぐらいだ。
Yes, he's Jamaican. So, okay, so I'm gonna do an escape so I can put one of his songs. This one is called Exodus, and this song speaks specifically about the how people have to be leaving their homes and their life because of how the conditions are in the country. So this specifically talks about African experience and Jamaican experience of how they had to leave. Let me know if you can listen to the music.
自分の
So
出ていかなきゃいけないっていう、そういう状況の人たちの気持ちを歌った歌です。No, we don't hear.
don't hear it? Oh, so I'm sorry, guys. I cannot.
You can send me the link. I will show
Okay. Okay, I'll do that. I'll send you all the links because we have a few. Okay, so another thing that I want to share about this artist particularly is that in his time he was able to create unity within political partitions in Jamaica at the moment that were being at war with each other. So I think that's a very strong message of how music can actually create a space where people can find themselves and unite. And, it's just an example of how achievable this can be. So I'm gonna talk about, let me move this here. So I'm gonna talk about Benito Martinez, which is famously known as Bad Bunny. I don't know, maybe some of you guys know him. But I want to talk about him and his last album in particular because this album, he took folkloric music of La Plena, Aguinaldo, which are very sacred musical expressions in Puerto Rico, and he put them in the album with the intent to create, first of all, love Puerto Rican identity, which is like the first thing to give hope to youth to have an identity and to love where they come from, which is something very powerful when you're a country that's been through multiple colonial and assimilation processes. And also, he in this album talks about like gentrification and the colonial economic policy. So one of the policies that he criticizes in this album is Law 20 and 22 that was developed in like 2015. And this law in particular lets millionaires come to Puerto Rico and they will be tax exempt. So this law in particular created an economical crisis for us because they would come here, buy properties, and they would be obligated to comply with having Puerto Rican workers within their corporation, but no one is fiscalizing this. So they're just doing whatever they want. And it has opened a gate of corruption in Puerto Rico, even a bit more than it was, and so this has complicated the life of the working class in Puerto Rico, and it has displaced people and make the living situation here even more difficult than it already was. So this album is like a love note to Puerto Rico, and hopefully, people, be influenced of what is happening at the moment. But it is very important to have, artists that are this well known and influenced to be conscious about the political situations where they come from. And the fact that he's visibilizing that is very important. And, we'll see, what consequences and what actions that would inspire. And that's something that we're still exploring, as Puerto Ricans.
この人は知らない、僕も知らないけど、すごく政治的なメッセージの強いアーティストで、2015年にできた法律で、多分アメリカからプエルトリコに来てビジネスを始める人たちは税金を払わなくていいみたいな、そんなような法律ができて、でその代わりプエルトリコの人たちを雇うとか、そういう決まりがあるんだけど、そういうことを全然守らないままそういうことが行われていて、でそういうことに対するその問題意識から反発から音楽でそれを表明している人で、すごい強いメッセージを持ったプエルトリコの伝統的な音楽をジャンルとして使ってメッセージを強く発信している。だから音楽っていうのを聞くときには、その音楽を作っている人たちの社会背景っていうのを知ってて聞いてほしいと思う時があるんです。こういう人たちに関して。
Okay. So migration is a very close subject to our culture in particular, because there's we are islands, so that makes us a little bit vulnerable in sense of climate change and our economical development, because of how everything has been surrounded by tourism and monocultivation. So that also harms our water systems, our soils. So, a lot of people are not completely conscious of that, but that's something I just want to share with you, because I think it's important to have this. And so migration has been something that's being experienced, and also our African influence has as well has survived with us within this moment. So something that is very influential within the African heritage is the Yoruban religion, which is a religion that is based on deities that form part of nature. I think it would be something similar to what would be Shinto for you guys. And so the Yoruban influence has helped a lot of this heritage to maintain itself. So one part of that way, this is a picture of Suriname from a photographer who I'm working currently on. And he shared to me that this Caribbean space in particular has Japanese influence, even Chinese influence, Indian influence. So even if it's in America, it has been part of this movement of people, and they have established themselves in the Caribbean. So I feel like, Caribbean is a space where all these different cultures are coming together. And this is kind of like a visual representation of how diverse and how moving our identities can be. So I want to talk about it and close this with carnivals, because I feel like carnivals are a place to honor who we are, and it's a place where people can defy what is happening and question things that they are not just for them. And it is done with music, it is done with dance, it is done with theater, with art. And I think it's the most revolutionary spaces where people can gather in the Caribbean and actually create, reclaim their space and fight that identity and rituals, which is very essential part of sustaining what would be Caribbean identity. So this picture in particular is about Guadalupe Carnival in Puente Prit. which is one of the capitals of the island. This island is talks French mostly because it's a French colony, and even with the language, there's barriers between islands, because as you see, the Caribbean is a form of different kinds of islands that were colonized by different type of people, and the languages itself would make this economicals to not, o sea, we don't have a shared economy within our system, even though we're like the most close to each other. So it's divided by language, it's divided by colonial influence, and I think that's why it's so important to like bring awareness to this, because it's something that could put us even in a vulnerable situation because we don't have like close support, and for things, going to the most practical and most simple problems that we could have, which is like, for example, hurricane season here is very, it's very scary for everyone because it could put a lot of communities in vulnerable situations. And if we don't have like a system of how we respond to this together as a geographic, that really complicates how we can respond to emergencies. Speaking about the most simple things in that you could be concerned of.
Let me translate.
Yes.
いくつかの話をバーっとちょっと続けて話してもらっちゃったんだけども、時間のこともあるからね。だけど、一つ言いたかったことっていうのは、そういうさっきアメリカの、経済的な占領みたいな状態の中で起きることっていうのは、そこの土地の人たちはとても弱い立場になり、海外に移住しなきゃいけない人も出てくるほど貧しくなり、そして、そこの土地はもうモノカルチャーっていうんだけど、単一作物をダーッと作るような搾取的な、農業になってしまうし、それからもう一つはツーリズムがねすごく強い産業になるから、そうすると結局土地の環境に対する尊敬の念というのはなくなってしまうんだよね。だから水も質も悪くなるし、土壌も悪くなるし、そういうことを守れなくなってしまうという大問題がありますよというのが一つの大きな話。もう一つは今度はそういうこの地域の人たちは本当に移住っていうことで出来上がってきた人たちなので、そもそもアフリカの人たちが無理やりこうやって奴隷として連れてこられたっていうところから始まってて、そこにスペインの人たちがたくさん移住してきて、フランスの人たちが植民地化してっていう、そういうことが起きた地域であり、そしてさらに最後になんかちょっと小学生みたいな子どもたちが映ってたのは、あそこはスリラムっていう南アメリカの端っこにあるオランダの植民地なんだよね。で、そんなところがどんなところになってるかっていうと、インドの人もいっぱい引っ越してきてるし、中国人もいっぱい住んでるし、もう本当に多様な人たちが移住してくる場所になってるんだよね。それは、I called this kind of place hot spot of Alberta the other day, right? そういうところっていうのはホットスポットなの、僕に言わせるとね。日本から想像がつかないぐらいいろんな人たちが出会う場所になってるわけで、その出会う人たちがしかも弱い立場に追い込まれていて、そして弱い人同士しかもつながりづらい状況があるわけです。島として分断されていたり、海外に移住してたり、ね、そういう中でのこの人たちのその自分たちの何か核になる中心になる文化的なアイデンティティっていうものを守り育てっていうことをやっている活動であり、その人たちがカーニバルとかって言ったけど、いろんな芸術家が来るからダンサーも来るんだよね。There'll be a dancer in your group, right? When you come to Japan.
Yes, yes,
She will be showing the carnival dance also.
Yeah, and Rafael knows participated in the carnival, so he's gonna talk about his experience as being one of the characters of the carnival. So that would be like very interesting as well too.
カーニバルって
share.
いうのは、ブラジルのカーニバル有名だけど、今、カリブ海でもカーニバルっていうのは一つの大きなムーブメントになってて、カーニバルを通じてものすごくパワフルに自分たちを表現するっていうことが起きているんですよ。で、そのカーニバルのアーティストも来るのって言ったら来るっていうので、カーニバルの体験ももしかしたらできるかもしれないっていう。So we have like maybe just ending words. Can we have?
Yes, this is like right now we just have resources if anyone wants to like read, or these are some of it that you can like, I could share more resources pages if you guys would like that. And yeah, well, thank you very much for thank you very much for listening and tuning in. Well, tuning in for myself, but for sharing this space. And if you guys, ever doubt of how to preserve your culture, it will be experiencing it with joy and experience it with creativity. So that's what I would like for you guys to take from this. And thank you very much. I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Can we take one question maybe?
Yeah. Let me close this real quick.
一つ誰か、はい。
Yes.
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
I have my name is Riku.
Riku.
I have a question. So you told me
Yes,
as the United States try to take land and culture away from 原住民
from indigenous
people
yeah.
to earn money, right? So on the other hand, do you feel there any positive accept? Do you feel
positive
accept introduced to United States
from the
from the United States language or
positive impact from
yeah.
the United States?
So, okay, so if we want to talk about positive, well, I guess language is permitting me to talk with you guys right now. So if I had to see something positive, well, it will be that. But definitely, especially in the current political, state right now, it is very dangerous to assimilate to to a mentality like that where you put yourself above a lot of communities, and that for me is very dangerous for any culture, and but I can see the good in some of the things, but what is happening politically right now in Puerto Rico is unfair, is unjust, and it should come to a decision where people can decide what they would like to define and what their governance should be. But thank you for that question, definitely. So, yes. Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you, Rocío. Maybe they will have other questions which I will gather and send forward.
Of course.
Yes.
Daisuke, we should do a picture before we leave.
Yeah. 写真を撮りましょうって。
Let me know when you guys are ready.
Yeah, we're ready. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Hey. Great. I have it.
Good.
I will send it to you. That's okay. Well, thank you very much.